During the wars of the ancient world, many would say that the most feared unit on the battlefield would have been the war elephant, towering above its fellow infantrymen and cavalry. The enormous beasts were many times the centerpiece of the ancient army, acting as the tanks of the ancient world, busting through lines of infantry and trampling dozens in their path. Beginnings of the elephant as a tool. Scholars believe that some of the first domestication attempts of the elephant occurred in India during the 3rd millennium BCE. The early peoples of the Indian subcontinent did not attribute the animal's large size and intimidating appearance as a candidate for war quite yet. That would only seem to occur early into the 1st millennium BCE. Because of this disconnect, elephants of ancient India, China, and the Middle East would largely be placed in roles pertaining to agriculture, transportation, and construction prior to the 1st millennium BCE. Their massive size allowed for a single elephant to carry or pull many times that of other domesticated species, while also being perfectly adapted for the local terrain and even being adept swimmers. In India, as it may have been for other regions, elephants were commonly used by nobility or the aristocracy as ancient limousines, with decorative adornments such as body paint, gold jewelry, and brightly colored tarps strewn across the animal's back, while the VIPs of the ancient world sat aloft either directly on the back of the animal or on small wooden platforms secured by leather straps along the animal's neck and underbelly. In the Mediterranean, the African forest elephant was the animal of choice for many because of their abundance and ease of access in comparison to the Indian elephant. Standing at just under 3 meters at the shoulder, they were smaller than their Asian counterparts, with loads being lighter to account for their smaller stature. However some artists may depict it, African savanna elephants, much larger cousins to the forest elephant, were never seen in battle or as work animals, as their sheer size and bad temper made for less than desirable outcomes for the trainers who attempted to tame them. Elephants have never truly been domesticated, thus the process of acquiring elephants has been much the same for millennia. Male elephants, the most likely to see battle, as female elephants will run away if charged by a male, would normally be lured in with either captured females or be corralled into a holding area with fire and loud noises as they can be easily spooked. Males would then be put through crushing, which entailed being beaten, whipped, starved, and generally abused until their spirits were broken and could then be used as working animals. It wasn't until the time of Alexander the Great that war elephants began an expansion west of modern-day Pakistan. In 326 BCE, Alexander was on the doorstep of King Porus, an incredibly powerful king of India at the bank of the Hydaspes River. Porus commanded a force of an estimated 200 elephants, more than enough to disrupt a large army line and make even Alexander stop to strategize a way around the beasts. Alexander, however, employed the use of mercenary horse archers and cavalry, common tactic of his, to flank the Indian army, and while having their main force distracted, pelted the elephants with arrows. While this went on, Alexander's allies began to move in from their position behind the Indian forces and surrounded Porus. With a final push from the Macedonians, and the Indian army's elephants now tired and scared, causing more damage to their own troops than to Alexander's from them rampaging, Alexander secured his victory, taking a few dozen war elephants home as his prize. Later in his campaigns, Alexander would begin using the captured elephants along with other sourced individuals in his conquests. As time progressed and the Punic Wars began, a new power in northern Africa, Carthage, would take over as the leading user of war elephants, frequently using them against the Romans in Sicily. Our most famous scene of war elephants, the crossing of the Alps by Hannibal, comes from the Second Punic War, in an attempt to move into Roman territory through southern France to begin his campaign across Italy. Moving on to armor and weaponry, the war elephants of Carthage are a beautiful example of the power these animals wielded. Armor could be as simple as some padding on the back and underbelly of the elephant to deflect smaller projectiles and to make the creature appear even larger than what it was, a good tactic for the smaller forest elephants. Above this, leather or metal plating could be applied to the weak points of the creature, such as the legs and the throat, providing ample protection from spears and swords. Records and examples of trunk and tusk plating have also been discovered, with flexible plated armor on the trunk and tusk swords sliding onto the animal's tusk to enlarge and sharpen the already deadly weapons. However, there have only been a few found, mostly dating from the 15th to 17th centuries AD, long after the height of elephant combat. With war elephants, the main killing power came from their riders, usually situated with 1 to 3 men armed with lances, javelins, and bows to keep enemy combatants away from the animal's vitals. Drivers, always situated on the neck of the elephant, were also trained and equipped to kill their mount if they begin to rampage out of control and start trampling friendly troops. Helmets have also been discovered, shielding the elephant's eyes and face while sometimes also helping to focus the gaze of the animal, similar to blinders on horses. Finally, on larger specimens able to carry the weight, howdahs could be situated, looking like a small tower atop the animal's back, giving riders cover and a far larger height advantage. These would be secured using heavy leather straps, ropes, and chains fastened around the animal's midsection, making them quite sturdy. Howdahs could also signify a general or commander's transport, giving them the most security and the best viewpoint on the battlefield. However, with this it should be known that the majority of contemporary depictions of war elephants show them virtually unequipped. This is believed to be mostly because of the high cost of creating and maintaining their gear and the restrictions on mobility whilst carrying the incredibly heavy armor. The main factor elephants brought to the battlefield was intimidation. As legions watched the beasts come crashing towards them, undisciplined regiments would falter and formations would collapse. Ancient historians describe some of the sights of the battlefield with elephants in play, trampling over soldiers, some picking up men and slamming them against the ground, or delivering them to drivers to inflict the final blow. The elephants would be situated in front of the main force, with an accompanying force of infantry between them. Normally, at the beginning of a battle, the commander would order a charge, and as the elephants broke through the front lines, the main force would begin advancing. Adept leaders would have regiments moving to the flanks of the opposing army as the war elephants advanced, diverting attention away from the encirclement taking place. These tactics would prove to be incredibly effective for centuries. However, after suffering so many losses, others began to devise countermeasures. Elephants were undoubtedly an imposing force on the battlefield. However, they were not perfect. Even the most well-trained elephants could falter at a moment's notice, harking back to the fact that nearly all war elephants were wild at some point in their lives. Anti-elephant tactics are seen just as far back as elephants have been involved in combat. In India, fortresses commonly displayed spiked doors and pits, warding off invading armies using elephants as battering rams. Traps were a common way of defeating elephants, such as using spike strips, much like modern police officers stopping fleeing cars. The elephant's weight would drive the spikes into their feet, and they would soon be stuck in place, as the pain would be too much to even flee, or they would topple over from the shock and possibly crush their riders. Caltrops were another common anti-elephant tool, much like the spike strips. These were hidden and caused immense pain for the elephants unlucky enough to step on one. Ranged weapons were also favorable, using full iron arrows to hit vital points or ballistae to skewer the beasts or their riders. Defending armies also engaged elephants with sensory overload. Records tell of many armies shouting, blowing horns, and banging on drums or shields to spook the elephants and cause them to turn round and trample their own. Finally, there is good evidence that other animals were used as distractions for elephant units, such as pigs or even camels with tinder loaded onto them, then set ablaze and pushed towards the approaching elephants. The strong smells, loud squealing, and reaction to the fire would certainly cause chaos among the unit, sending elephants fleeing from the sensory overload back towards friendly troops. Eventually, the use of elephants began to rapidly decline after the invention of gunpowder and subsequently firearms and cannons. The beasts could just not make it on the battlefield any longer with superior ranged weapons taking the forefront, and they were reduced to an almost entirely support-like role with construction and transport. Here's a list of all my sources. Thank you for listening.